Welcome to the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast. We're going to explore ways to sharpen our diagnostic skills, find learning resources, and hear from experts in the automotive field. This episode is brought to you by L1 Automotive Training and Keith Perkins. If you're looking for education on module programming, J2534, EEPROM work, key and immobilizer, electrical diagnostics, or drivability diagnostics, Keith has a website, l1training.com, that's got over 60 hours of training videos on all those subjects and more. When I first started out doing mobile, I utilized Keith's videos on module programming in J2534 in order to get my head wrapped around what I would need for the tooling, the computers, the software setups, what kind of obstacles I would be up against when I'm out there programming modules on cars. And it was a huge benefit to me. And I continue to use the training videos that he has on his website. So I strongly recommend checking out l1training.com. The link is in the show notes. I am happy to have Automotive Seminars as a sponsor for the show. Now, if you're not familiar, Automotive Seminars is a diagnostic technician training company. They've got a website that there'll be a link to in the show notes. And what they offer is top-notch training to technicians like us in the field. I've been taking their training courses for years and have got a ton of benefit out of it. They've got top-notch instructors, John Thornton, Scott Shotton, Scott Manna, and every other month they've got a 2-night course that you can sign up for. Join in, ask questions, and afterwards, you've paid for the course, you can access a recorded version whenever you want. You can rewatch the class 2 years later in case you wanted some details on it. And that is a fantastic feature. So make sure to check out the website to see what courses they have available and what's coming up in the future. Sean Tipping, I'll be your host once again for this episode. You got just me on the show this week, and I'm going to be following up on a vehicle that if you've been listening to the show for the last 6 to 8 months, somewhere in there, you've probably heard me reference this vehicle, that there never was a resolution. I didn't do an actual case study on it here, but I think in talking with guests, I brought it up a handful of times that hey, I can't get this vehicle to pass calibration. And that's exactly what I was attempting to do. This was a 2019 Subaru Crosstrek. And originally what happened was a shop that I do a lot of work for, they're a used car lot / body shop. So they buy a lot of wrecked vehicles. They've got the frame alignment racks. They do a ton of work to these vehicles, get them ready for resale, and then they put them on a lot and resell them. And so I've done a number of ADAS jobs for them and actually learned quite a bit in that because most of these vehicles have been smashed in one form or another. And so lots of bent brackets and broken components and things that don't line up correctly, or they know that they are not lining up correctly, and that's why they're calling me, but figuring out exactly how to get them lined up correctly has been interesting at times. I found some of the blind spot monitor brackets for the rear of the vehicle. Service information doesn't always really tell you exactly what to do to verify the angle on those things. Some do. And I can say most of them, at least vertically, you're going to want to see 90 degrees. I'm sure there's an exception to that, but most of them that I do, the rear radars should sit about 90 degrees. The horizontal, of course, is going to change depending on the vehicle and just where and how that rear bracket, is positioned behind the bumper matters. So I've learned quite a bit working with this particular shop. But anyways, they had a 19 Subaru Crosstrek, and this was at the end of last summer, so August 2023. And it had been in a wreck, which is definitely relevant, but they got it all fixed up and replaced the windshield on this because the windshield was smashed, and they put in aftermarket glass. But I guess where it started was they said, hey, the eyesight light, the warning light is on. And these Subarus, like many others, have the dual stereo camera set up where it's bolted up to the roof right at the top of the windshield, and then you get the two cameras looking out around the rearview mirror for the ADAS purposes, right? Lane keep or warning systems. It's the ADAS system that a lot of these Subarus use. And so when we calibrate these, we're going to use a rather large target that you're going to set up a set distance in front of the vehicle and then run the calibration with the scan tool. And it's fairly straightforward. Of course, this was my first one with a Subaru that I ever did. I've done other calibrations, but I had not done a Subaru calibration to this point. Well, I get in there, can't get this thing to pass. I get a contrast error. It's optical access contrast not good. That's the error I get in the scan tool every single time that I tried to do this. And I probably won't walk you through every single thing that I did. I had an exorbitant amount of time in this vehicle, that's for sure. But I tried just about everything I could think of. Now, granted, I've never seen one of these pass. So the whole time that I'm working with this vehicle, I'm wondering, what am I missing here? What am I doing wrong? Because it's one thing if I had done 100 of these and then this one didn't work. I might have a different thought process of, well, I've never done, this particular vehicle before. I was really thinking, what am I doing wrong? And I'm going over different things. And I tried different places within their shop. And luckily they do have actually a couple rather large spaces that I can work with for these ADAS calibrations. And both of them, for what I'm considering, it's good lighting for ADAS work. There's not a whole lot of shadows, and it's decent lighting. You can see the targets. There's nothing in the background that I really feel like is going to disrupt this, but I moved the car around anyways. Made sure the floor is level, all that stuff, lighting, clean the windshield, look at the camera lenses themselves to see if there's smudges on them, double, triple checking the target position and height and angle, all this stuff. I am using an aftermarket calibration kit, the target, the scan tool. And so that was something I was wondering about. I'm like, well, is there something up with this target? And I talked to some friends after trying this a few times, and they, verified that I was doing the setup correctly, gave me some suggestions. And they did say, like, hey, we do this with these aftermarket topped on targets. That's what I'm using. I talked to PJ Walter specifically. I talked to Fonslow too. And PJ's like, yeah, I do them with the topped on. It's not an issue. And we compared targets. What I did end up finding at one point was that the topped on target, at least the one that I had, was different than the OE target. Like if you look at the actual pattern, and it's just like a series of squares that are white, gray, and black. And I looked at the factory one because you could find it online, and I compared it to mine, and the pattern was actually different. And so after trying this a number of different ways, a number of different times, I decided that I would try to print an OE target for this thing because I was considering that my aftermarket target could be an issue because it's different than the OE. I don't know, but I could not get this thing to pass. And so I used a local print shop. And if you're looking to make some ADAS targets, now is this necessarily the correct way to go? I mean, it could be, because if you look at OE service information on some ADAS targets, they just tell you to print it off. Literally, you're printing the target. And you can work with some local print shops and have them do the same thing on a nice piece of canvas. I had to do that on a material that had a adhesive backing to it. And I literally just put it on the back side of the target, the top down one, so I could flip it around and I could try that. And so I did that. Same thing. Contrast air, contrast air. Okay. This is when we started looking at the car a little bit closer, and it had been in a wreck. And so the camera itself is highly suspect. They get me actually a couple used cameras. Now, here, where did these used cameras come from? Are they from Crosstreks that have been smashed up as well? I don't know. But we tried both of those, and they both gave the same error. Optical access contrast air, not good. And if you look up the definition for this code and what it tells you to do, there's some decent information in the troubleshooting for these systems when you get an error. And they have 12 possible things in one section of the info. Well, this particular error, some of the other errors will just point to one. They'll be like, oh, number 7, check this. But for the optical access contrast, not good, it says, well, it could be any one of these 12 different things causing this. And it is good to look at this so that you have an idea of like, what things should I be checking for, right? And this is things like making sure that the camera cover is installed correctly, that there's no obstacles blocking the stereo camera, the plate and the camera are assembled correctly with no gap, you're using the correct chart, there's no obstacles between the chart and the camera, the windshield is clean, the pattern itself, the target itself is clean, the lighting is good, the headlights are off, there's no objects on the like the dash, the instrument panel. There's no dirt on the lenses of the camera. There's no crack in the windshield, right? And this is all stuff that I had kind of gone through with my inspection, and none of it seemed to be an issue. And all 3 cameras we tried gave us the exact same error. So I told the guy, who I will say through this entire thing was really understanding and patient, getting this resolved. But I told him, I was like, well, there is a chance that it could be a camera. I don't have anything for sure that's pointing me that direction. But the other thing that I'm suspect about, and this is based off of talking to some friends and just trying this, I got to the point where I memorized the setup for this freaking Subaru. I know the distances and how to measure everything, how to place the target. But one of the things that was brought up was that the glass was aftermarket. And he had told me that up front. This is not Subaru OE glass. And so I talked to him about that. He's like, well, you know what? We will try OE glass. That definitely sounds like this could be causing an issue where the camera is not able to see correctly. And I've seen some stuff online where you could use your phone camera and maybe see some of the distortion. I wasn't really able to make anything work there that was like, yeah, that's it. I really wished through this whole time that there was something you could do to see what the camera sees. I think that would be really interesting, but I don't think such a thing exists, at least not on these Subarus. So that's the trouble with some of this ADAS stuff, right? It's like programming. It's easy until it isn't. And in this case, when it isn't, it doesn't really tell you why it's unhappy. Right? You have that whole list of stuff. I checked all that stuff. Something is wrong, obviously. Something is preventing this from passing calibration. But we're kind of guessing, to be totally honest, and just going after the things that we know might not be right, like the aftermarket glass. Now, the camera too. Hey, maybe it needs a new camera. The camera was expensive for a new one, and so I think he was holding off for that reason. Anyways, he gets OE Subaru glass in there, and they install it themselves. They do a good job. It's lined up properly. You know, I was looking at the little, there's kind of like a little black dot pattern at the top that goes around near where the cameras are. And I wanted to make sure that the glass was set right and not like down in front of the camera obstructing the view. Well, it didn't look to be. It looked like it was set correctly. With the OE glass, it still does not pass. I can't get this thing, and same air every single time. And the last thing that I looked at, and I'll come back to this, but the last thing I looked at is a couple friends reached out to me with some really good information. This was September. This was mid-September when I was back on this one. It had been a few weeks back and forth with this thing. And I was sent a service bulletin from Subaru that actually came out on September 11th, 2023. So this was like coming out right around the time that I was doing this vehicle, interestingly enough. And had a friend send this to me, like brand new right out of Subaru. And it talks about the angle of the body line and the angle of the camera mount, and that this is a problem on some of these Subarus that have had large impact or body damage. And they give you some angle measurements and some different places to do it on the vehicle. And I'll come back to the details on this, but basically it has you measure the angle of the bottom of the vehicle along where the pinch weld is, and then also the bracket that the camera mounts to. This episode is brought to you by AutoRescueTools.com and Isaac Rodell. If you are looking to get into module programming, but you are not sure what kind of laptop you're going to need or how to set it up for programming, Isaac is your guy. He can set up laptops specifically to do control module programming for specific brands with partitioned hard drives and all the software that you're going to need to do this. He also sells key cutting equipment, scan tools, and other diagnostic equipment. I bought some stuff from him in the past, and the support is phenomenal. So I highly recommend checking out the website. Again, that's autorescuetools.com. The link will be in the show notes. And it gives you some specs and says should be within these specs. If it's not, adjust it. Obviously, the body of the vehicle, you're not adjusting, but the camera angle you can adjust by shimming the plate. So that's what it has you do. Now, I would imagine if there's enough of a body angle defect that you're going to have to, there's going to be more work than an average technician like myself is going to be doing to that vehicle. But it would be able to identify the problem. And really what this is about is it's changing the angle that the camera views. And so if you're setting up the target in the correct position and the camera's not looking at it or not looking at it the correct way, of course it's not going to pass calibration. All right. Hey, have you ever been faced with the challenge of sourcing, installing, and programming a used control module in a vehicle? I know a lot of us have. It seems to be happening more and more often today with the volume of control modules on vehicles, the cost of some new ones, or even the availability of new control modules. In some cases, used may be the only option. So what do you do here? I strongly recommend checking out SJ Auto Solutions and Tommy Oliva. Tommy offers a cloning service for used control modules to make these things plug and play for the vehicle that you're working on. In a lot of cases, he is also able to source the control modules if you're unable to locate one for the vehicle that you're working on. But once you get connected with Tommy, he's going to offer fantastic support from start to finish to make sure that that control module is going to work in your application. He's also got tech support that he offers through his website, along with some free resources there as well on information about used control module programming. So make sure to check out SJ Auto Solutions. I can't recommend that enough. And it actually does give you, some error codes that will pop up here and what to go through. Anyways, I go through this and I check the angles and everything checks out. I actually have pictures too. I took pictures so I could document everything I was doing when I would come back to this every time. And I have the pictures and they match the specs that are in the TSP. So at that point, and I think I tried it one more time, but at that point, I was like, hey guys, I'm out of options here. It might need a new camera, but I am not confident enough to tell you to go buy one because they're expensive. I'm just kind of walking away from this one for now. And he understood and he was grateful for my assistance and, chalk it up to a learning experience, although it didn't get to the conclusion. And that was about the point where I had talked to some people on the podcast about it. So you might have heard it brought up. So they decided, well, we'll bring it into the Subaru dealer and we'll see what they can do with it and get this thing working. Because they want to sell the car, right? They're into the car for X amount and they want to flip it, right? I get it. You got to make money. So they want to get this thing figured out. They take it to Subaru. It's at Subaru for a month and a half or something crazy like that. And I don't know if all that time was waiting to get looked at or if they were actually messing with the car for that period of time, but it was there for a long time. And in that time, they told them, yep, you need a brand new camera. Or I think first they told them something about the glass wasn't OE, but it was, and they had the receipts. But then they said that, okay, well, you need a new camera. That's why this thing is not passing. And the shop told Subaru, yes, we'll do a camera. We'll pay for it if that fixes it. But if that doesn't fix our problem, if you still have the same error, we're not going to pay for the camera. They said, okay. So they put a new camera in it at Subaru, did not fix it. So the contrast error, and I was persistent on asking them, can you ask them what error they're getting? And that was the same thing. Optical access contrast error when trying to do the calibration. And Subaru told them, we can't do anything with it. Now, I didn't hear the details as to why, and I don't ever mean to bash another shop. Obviously, I walked away I gave up on it too, right? So in no way am I saying, hey, well, look at Subaru, can't fix this car. I had my fill of this thing and got beat up by it just as well. And I don't know exactly why they decided to walk away from it. Was it because it was a wrecked vehicle? Right? I don't know if this thing had a salvage title or whatever. That's possible. They might have a policy on something like that where, like, we're not going to waste, a bunch of our tech's time on smashed up vehicles trying to get these things to pass calibration. But either way, they chose to walk away from it after a period of time, and the new camera did not fix it. So the shop gets this Subaru back, right? And they are kind of just lost because they can't sell it, or they can't sell it at the price point that they want to sell it at, with these lights on and the system's not working and a potential safety issue. Okay. And kind of just left it at that. And they had left it open to me like, hey, if you ever get any extra time and you want to mess around with this thing or you come up with anything, let us know. We're going to use it as a parts runner until then. And I was like, all right, yeah, I'll do that with all my extra time that I have. But I did, I was thinking about it from time to time, and I did a couple other Subarus after that point with no issues. So at least on that side of things, it verified that my equipment, my targets, my setup, all that stuff was correct because I had no issues with the other ones that I did, 90 plus accuracy rate when I would do the calibration. All right, cool. Well, just recently, this car lot got another 19 Crosstrek in. I don't know where they purchased it from. This one had no lights on, and I don't know if it was smashed or in a wreck or anything, but anyways, they got it, and it was an identical vehicle down to the color. It's actually the same color 19 Subaru Crosstrek. And so he calls me, he's like, hey, if you want, come try to calibrate this vehicle, do it in the same spot in the shop with your same equipment and everything, and see if it passes, right? We will confirm all of the environmental factors, like something in the backdrop I'm not aware of, lighting that's just not making sense. Right now, Subaru couldn't do it either, but he's like, try to do it on this exact vehicle and see what happens. I'm like, yeah, let's give it a shot. And so I go out there and do that, and it passes. First time, 88% accuracy with this thing. And I'm doing it exactly the same in the exact same spot as I was the other one. Okay, so we do have a known good, and we pulled in the other one, set it up, contrast error. Okay, well, what is different between these two? And that's the amazing thing about having a known good in this industry. You can figure stuff out so much easier when you have a known good vehicle. And of that aspect, I am so jealous of the guys and gals that work at dealerships and potentially have access to known good vehicles. Oh man, would that have been so awesome so many times in my career. And it was the answer here. Although there's a bit of a caveat. I feel like I should have gotten this sooner. But it's all learning. Anyways, I'm like, okay, what is different about this vehicle? And I actually had Steve there with me the other day, just to give me a hand moving stuff around and swapping vehicles in and out and stuff. I was like, there's clearly something different. Let's really take a good look at it. And we really zeroed in on physical mounting of components, things that look different between the vehicles. And we started to look at the angles of things again. And what I wanted to do, my first thought was, I'm going to put a laser pointer and pick a specific point on the camera itself, right? The camera's inside the vehicle, sits up on the roof line there. I'm going to put the laser up on this camera, and I'm going to put the target where I'm not even going to touch the target, right? I set it up for the one vehicle. It passed. I bring the other vehicle in, and we had to, tweak things for vehicle center line and distance and stuff, but we didn't really move anything too far from where it was. And I want to see where this laser lines up with on the target board. And I'm affixing this laser to the camera, to the stereo camera. And I'm going to compare known good to known bad. And so we do that. We look at where the laser intersects on the target of the known good versus our bad one. And it is a surprising distance apart. And I'm talking north-south difference of probably 6 to 7 inches. The good vehicle is above the known bad, or the bad vehicle, about 6 or 7 inches. And I did it on both sides of the camera. So because it's got the two eyes, right? You put it on either side, and noticeably different. So now this is becoming very, very clear of, well, hey, this camera is not pointed in the correct direction compared to our known good. And we did double check ride height, and the ride height was a little different between these two vehicles as well. And so that could be playing a slight role in it as well. But what we did was we went to the camera and we had to take down the plastic covering, but we took a digital angle gauge and we looked at the angle of the camera on the known good, and it was about 17 degrees of a tilt when you put the angle gauge up to the body of the camera. So the camera mounted up to its bracket. And we go over to our bad one, it's about 21 degrees, right? So we're 4 degrees off, which doesn't seem like a lot, but when you extend that out, the 4,000 millimeters from the axle center line, that's a large amount, right? That distance, that difference in where that camera is pointing changes quite a bit. And this is our answer. 100% for sure, this camera is pointed down, and that's why it's not working. Now, if you just look at the lenses, you can't tell this. I don't know. Maybe if I saw 1,000 Subarus, maybe I could pick it out, but there's no way. Now, here's the weird thing. If I mentioned, I looked at the TSB. I made some measurements on this vehicle, and I actually have pictures of that. Now, the measurements in the vehicle have you remove the camera and put the digital angle gauge up to the bracket itself. And it even gives you a specific place to put the angle gauge on the bracket, which I did. And that's my picture, and it's within spec. And I have pictures of the body line as well. It measured at 16 degrees or 16.3 degrees when for my picture on September 13th. That it was at 16, which is within range. It's supposed to be between 17 and 14 is the range of tilt on this thing. And I don't know what I did wrong there. Either it's not placed correctly. I didn't zero my angle gauge correctly. I'm really not sure, but I'm looking at me holding this angle gauge up there on this car and it's showing me 16 degrees. Now, we didn't remove the camera down. I didn't do that measurement. We were kind of excited when we found, because we knew this was a problem, but I have pictures of the angle gauge on the bottom of the camera itself on the good and the bad, and we're off by 4 degrees. Now, we were interested to see how this would work. And so we moved the target board. I'm not going to send it out like this, but we moved the target board down so that the laser intersected at the same place on the target board. And we tried the calibration just to see if it would pass. It didn't. So then we moved the target board back up, right? Because you're raising the target up and down to put it at the specified height that's listed in service information. And then we shimmed the bracket plate. So you can unbolt this bracket plate from the roof, and it's basically just a washer to get this thing at the degree that we wanted it to. We put it right at about 17 where the known good one was at, and we ran it through calibration. It passed the first time, 80% accuracy, and you can drive it for more, but that was it. And I had done this or attempted this calibration on this vehicle, I don't know how many times, and contrast error, and it went through the first time once we had the camera pointed at the correct angle. So here's the thing. I should have figured this out when I had that TSB. I really don't know where I went wrong, whether it was my tooling or human error, but that was for sure the issue, is the angle of the camera. I don't know why Subaru didn't figure this out. Now, granted, like I said, this service bulletin came out on the 11th of September in 23. So it's pretty new. I mean, they should have access to that stuff. Again, why they, decided to give up on it. Maybe because it was a smashed vehicle. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly why they weren't able to catch this. I should have caught it sooner, but I eventually did. And I wanted to share it with everybody on the podcast here, not only just to follow up, and not only because I think it's interesting and helpful, and hopefully that helps you out. I think the first thing I might be doing on these from now on is checking the angle, now that I have a picture of a known good here. But also just to share, like a lot of things that we do, and it's not my phrase, but it's been said a lot, like programming is easy until it isn't. Keys are kind of the same way. They're easy until they're not, and then they suck. And ADAS is the same thing. I think it's true of a lot of the stuff that we do on cars. We find some things that are profitable. You can bust out 6-7 jobs in a day, make some really good money. Hey, things are flowing. It's easy. Well, until it isn't. And sometimes those are, man-made problems or user error. Sometimes the vehicles are really, really tough. This is one that beat me up, right? I did not make money on this car. I got paid, but I didn't charge for every single minute that I spent on that car. No way. I missed some stuff, and I learned a lot on this vehicle. And so it was a really hard learning experience for me, but I feel like that's something that I've got to go through in order to get where I need to be to do this stuff, offered as a service to my customers. So I wanted to share that with everybody for those reasons. So hopefully you found that interesting, and hopefully it helps you out and gives you something to think about if you run into some of these vehicles. And I think we're only going to see more and more. I said this to Steve the other day. Like, I think a lot of ADAS, as far as diagnosis goes, is just figuring out what is bent or broken or out of place. I mean, really, that is most of it. It sure seems like that we're doing, especially with these smashed up vehicles. But hopefully that gives you something to consider if you're running into vehicles like this. So anyways, just like to thank everybody out there for listening to the podcast. I really appreciate it. Hey, if you're going to be down in Australia at the Expo, come find me, come say hi, we'll hang out. It's going to be a good time. I'm looking forward to it. Going to be down there a little over a week here. So anyways, with that all the way, let's get out there, start fixing the world one car at a time.